Good morning, everyone, on this beautiful Sunday. It is a pleasure to greet each of you and to join you by way of video. I'd like to begin this devotional this morning with a few verses from Psalm 137, and then following that to center a few thoughts around the scripture and our present crises. Psalm 137, by the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept. When we remembered Zion, there on the poplars we hung our harps. For there our captors asked us for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? The presentation of the Passion Week in the Gospels shows the person of Jesus as one who seemingly knew that his life was ending. It was a week of crises, drama, and death. Of course, the world of Jesus' day was never the stranger to upheaval and death. Jews over the centuries have seen their lives disrupted more than once. They knew what it was to practice their faith in the midst of changing circumstances. And when they were prisoners way down in Babylon, they were heard to cry, "How can we worship God in a strange land?" Always when we find ourselves in the land of strange circumstances, there are the questions of why and how. When Jesus went into the temple courts and overthrew the money changers at the beginning of the Passion Week, he was asked by the people, "What sign or miracle do you give us as an authority to do such a thing in our temple?" And Jesus' reply was, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again." Ironically, Jesus was not talking about the temple structure. He was talking about the temple of his own body, which in the Gospels was foreshadowed to be destroyed and raised up again. The Son of Man must die and be raised on the third day. When Jesus died, the disciples were in the midst of a rapidly changing circumstances. Ironically as well, some 40 years after Jesus' own body was destroyed, the city of Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, and the beautiful Herod's temple was completely demolished. Jews were again cast into the middle of crises and rapidly changing circumstances. Jews again were left without the focal point of their religion, the temple. But that wasn't the end of Judaism. And when the Romans invaded Palestine, the young Christian population was dispersed. But that wasn't the end of Christianity. When those pillars that we think are the foundations of all what holds us together disappear, the scripture indicates we have a city, we still have a kingdom, whose maker and builder is God. We have looked out on our world in these past days, upon our nation and upon our country. We did see such change and crisis happening. We couldn't see it happening so quickly. We have seen many of the foundations that hold our country together seemingly crumble overnight. Volatile markets, loss of investments, layoffs, oil prices plunge. Did we ever consider that society might be so vulnerable? Did we ever think that life in this century was so tentative? But the truth is that the uncertainty that we now face is a day-by-day concern for someone somewhere in the world, many of whom are in our own backyard and community. It is just that what we are facing now with COVID-19 is a shared community crisis. It seems at times that crisis does not hold its true weight until it comes to our front door. When it comes, we are left asking, what is going to happen? What is in our future? How will I provide? How will we get through? The one foundation that we still have as a country is that we are a community. And if we stand as a united community, we too will survive. Just look at the Jewish community in the world. How did they survive being driven from their homeland so many times? How did their religion survive after the demise of their holy temple? How did they survive the great Holocaust and the last World War? How have they survived all the anti-Semitism over their history? I believe they survived because they believed their lives are rooted in God, but also because historically they always banded together in community. And in community, I believe we do our best when we follow the first command, to love the Lord your God with all your mind and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. When we have that respect for life, the world, and the universe that is bigger than ourselves, perhaps then we can have that love toward our neighbor in the way that Christ himself taught. And so as we move forward in this crisis we are facing, we will not do it in and of ourselves. While we are perhaps cut off physically in some ways, yet we still realize that we are a community. And as Christians, we are a community of faith. And so we will dig deep within ourselves and find that inner faith in God and the fortitude to keep going. And we will reach out to each other in our communities because that is what made our country great. For those of us as Christians who worship in a building somewhere on a given Sunday, we should know that our faith is not restricted to a building. Many of us will miss our worship time together and the fellowship and the Bible studies. But when the church door closes, the church does not cease to be the church. Jesus said to the woman of Samaria who came to fill her water pot at the village well, "There will come a time when you will neither worship at this Mount Gerizim in Samaria, nor at this temple or mountain in Jerusalem." Why? Because the thread that holds our faith together has nothing to do with buildings or crosses, or which hymn we sing or do not sing. Our faith is something that originates in the deep recesses of our being. And when everything that is temporal is taken away, our faith is still there. When my mother lay dying, she said, "I cannot think about leaving my family." In that moment, the little house that she loved so much was insignificant. She did not think about her little bank account. She wasn't tore up about her medications, and she always just had to have her medications right. No, the most important thing was her family and her faith. Every now and then, life sends us little reminders, and sometimes big reminders, of our own mortality and the tentativeness of life. On those days, we look out. The sun looks a little brighter, and we cherish those around us just a little more. And life just seems a tad sweeter because we realize how quickly our security can be taken away. So as we have to embrace our losses of varying degrees in these days, let us remind ourselves of what we have left. And let us ask ourselves a question: how can I share what I have with someone else? It was said of the early Christians that they shared their possessions with a common community. Look at our traditional native families. They shared their resources with their community. And in Newfoundland in the past, in some of our little outport communities, if there was an harvest from the sea, people shared it around in the community. This should not be a time when we hoard to ourselves. Rather, this should be a time when we share with our neighbor and look after our neighbor. Some of the things you thought were important in these days may have been taken away or are being threatened to be taken away. Well, maybe this is an opportunity to discover what is really important in life. The Jews went through that time when they mourned the loss of life they had back in Canaan. How can we sing the songs of Zion, they cried, when we are in this strange land so far from home? And so they hung up their harps, and there by the rivers of Babylon they wept. But as a people, they survived. They have gone through their struggles and their crises, but they have survived. Why? Because they had the inward faith and will to survive. And so will we. This is the time we look back. We look back on the faith of our forefathers, and we see how they, through faith and trust in God, persevered and faced the challenges of life. And so as we face this challenge, let us dig within our innermost being and let our faith find its perfect work. Let's be the community of faith, both in substance and practice. I want to say again today that if any of you are in need, you can contact us at any time. We don't know how long this crisis will last. And so over time, needs may develop in your own life and family. I know we are all under the guidelines as set forth by the government officials. And as Christians, we need to do our utmost to live within those requirements. But if someone is in need, there is always a way of meeting that need. And we assure you today that even if you just want to chat to someone or for someone to pray with you, then give us a call or call a friend, because it is so important to stay in touch, in contact in these days. And if we do that, then hopefully no one will be missed. So take care of yourself. Stay safe. I'll pray for you, and you pray for me. God bless you, and rest in His peace today.